In October of 1776, while 13 colonies fought for their independence, a 23-year-old Rhode Island Quaker lay dying of fever. The neighbors kept a death watch, and when the fever broke, the person who rose from that bed said that Jemima Wilkinson had died, that the soul had gone up to heaven, and the body had been given back, reanimated by a spirit of life from God, and sent to preach. For the next 43 years, that person would answer to no birth name and to no gender at all. The death and rebirth of the public universal friend. To understand the prophet, you have to begin with the child. Jemima Wilkinson was born in Cumberland, Rhode Island on the 29th of November, 1752, the 8th of 12 children in a fourth-generation Quaker family. It was a family woven into the Revolution, a first cousin to Stephen Hopkins, a signer of the Declaration, and to Esek Hopkins, first commander of the Continental Navy. Named for one of the daughters of Job, the child was a strong, athletic reader who absorbed the King James Bible so completely that its phrases became a natural part of speech. By the mid-1770s, that faith had grown restless. Dissatisfied with the silence of the Quaker meeting, Wilkinson began attending the fervent gatherings of the New Light Baptists, and for that, in 1776, was disciplined and then disowned by the Smithfield Friends. The break came inside a wider rupture. 2 brothers were disowned that same year for training to fight. The pacifist Quakers were expelling them for joining the Revolution. By that autumn, Jemima Wilkinson was unmoored, cut off from the Quakers, unsatisfied by the Baptists, and living inside a war. Then came the fever, most likely typhus. The patient lay near death. The doctor thought the illness had touched the mind. And in the crisis, the dying Quaker reported hearing 2 archangels who proclaimed a single, spacious welcome.
Room, room, room in the many mansions of eternal glory for thee and for every one.
The soul, the friend said, had ascended. The body was now the vessel of the Spirit of life from God. It took a new name, the public universal friend, citing Isaiah, a new name which the mouth of the Lord hath named. The birth identity was, from that moment, simply dead. And what made such a claim legible, even compelling, was the moment itself. The Great Awakening had normalized dramatic conversion. New Light theology legitimized direct revelation. Quakerism supplied a language of the genderless inner light, and the Revolution had shattered the ordinary structures of authority. Into that opening stepped a prophet who fit no existing category. The most radical act was lifelong and total. From 1776 onward, the friend refused to answer to Jemima Wilkinson and asked to be referred to with no gendered pronouns at all, neither he nor she. Followers largely complied, writing only the friend, or PUF, many avoiding gendered pronouns even in their private diaries. When visitors pressed, asking whether they addressed Jemima Wilkinson, the friend answered with the words Jesus gave to Pilate, "Thou sayest it," and asked, directly, whether the friend was a man or a woman. The reply was the voice of God from the burning bush.
I am that I am.
The friend dressed the part of the claim. The habit was a long, loose black clerical robe, a white or purple kerchief knotted at the throat in the men's fashion, and, outdoors, a broad-brimmed beaver hat of the kind worn by Quaker men. Indoors, pointedly, the friend wore no woman's hair cap. The look was deliberate, and it was transmitted. The close disciple Sarah Richards adopted a similarly androgynous hair, dress, and manner. To one man who criticized the appearance, the friend replied without apology,
There is nothing indecent or improper in my dress or appearance. I am not accountable to mortals.
Contemporaries strained to categorize what they saw and heard. The voice was described by turns as clear and harmonious, and as grum and shrill, a kind of croak, unearthly and sepulchral, a feminine-masculine tone. That very disagreement is the evidence. The friend's presence unsettled the binary itself. The president of Yale College, Ezra Stiles, no believer, found something he could only call by 3 plain words:
decent and graceful and grave.
How to read this is now a live debate. Some historians frame the friend as the first American to declare independence from gender, in the same year as the political declaration. Others urge care, that the friend would not have used our vocabulary and partly reinforced a male-coded authority by refusing womanhood. The most careful biographer, Paul Moyer, resists retrofitting modern categories at all, situating the friend's genderlessness in its own logic, where the body was animated by a sexless, divine spirit. The non-binary reading is a serious and growing position. It is not yet a settled one. And the risk runs both ways: underreading the friend as fraud or curiosity, or overreading a pre-modern soul into a present-day label. For all the scandal of the messenger, the message was strikingly ordinary. Visitors came expecting heresy and went away puzzled by how conventional it was. One hearer, after a meeting in 1788, confessed as much.
From common report, I expected to hear something out of the way in doctrine, which is not the case. I heard nothing but what is common among preachers.
The friend preached free will against Calvinist predestination, the possibility of salvation for all who repented, and an urgent apocalyptic call to turn from sin before a coming day of judgment, reading New England's eerie dark day of 1780 as prophecy fulfilled. Above it all sat the golden rule, in the friend's own phrasing, "Do unto all men as you would be willing they should do unto you." The friend taught abstinence as the ideal, plain living in the Quaker key, and open hospitality to all comers, and preached always from memory, never carrying a Bible to meeting. The community that gathered called itself the Society of Universal Friends, roughly equal numbers of women and men, most under 40, many of them free Quakers disowned for supporting the war. And within it, a striking order emerged. A corps of some 4 dozen unmarried women, the faithful sisterhood, took on roles usually reserved for men. In the society's settlements, nearly a fifth of households were headed by women, far above the regional norm. The friend taught that women should obey God rather than men. But the loyalty demanded in return had a harder edge.
"You cannot be my friends, except you do whatsoever I command you."
The friend's witness against slavery was early, personal, and effective. Calling for abolition, the friend persuaded followers who held people in bondage to free them. The clearest case was Judge William Potter of Rhode Island, who under the friend's preaching freed his slaves, abandoned his political career, and built an abbey wing onto his mansion for the profit. And the society was integrated enough that several black members of the congregation served as witnesses on the manumission papers, a civic role, not merely a presence. Where mainstream Quakers ended slaveholding by collective discipline, the friend worked face-to-face, by persuasion, arriving at the same end, by a different road. And the wartime ministry cut clean across the conflict's bitter lines. The friend preached through Rhode Island, Connecticut, and the Philadelphia region, territory that included British-occupied ground, treating the revolution as a symptom of a sinful world, rather than a cause to be chosen. By one account, the friend inveighed against sin to British and American soldiers alike, drew the American general Horatio Gates to a meeting, and attended the executions of condemned spies on both sides. That refusal to choose had a price. Pacifism near occupied ground drew accusations of loyalism. Critics charged again and again that the friend claimed to be Christ, a claim the friend always denied. A traveling Quaker minister, William Savory, gave the mainstream's verdict.
Pride and ambition to distinguish themselves from the rest of mankind.
By the mid-1780s, hounded in the eastern cities, the society resolved to build a peaceful habitation of its own on the far western frontier of New York. A vanguard reached the Genesee country in 1788. The main body followed in 1790, some 260 strong, the largest settlement of its kind that far west in the state. They had come to be left alone, but the ground they chose would not leave them alone. The land sat inside a tangle of titles called the Phelps and Gorham Purchase, on country only partly ceded by the Seneca, in the long shadow of the Sullivan campaign that had burned their towns in 1779. And when the boundary was resurveyed in 1792, at least 25 of the Friends' homes and farms turned out to lie on the wrong side of the line, outside New York's jurisdiction, on land that had passed to other owners. Settlers had to buy their own farms a second time at rising prices. This snake pit of titles, they called it the Gore, would poison the community from within. As an escape, the followers bought land along a creek they named Brook Kedron, running down into Kuka Lake. There they built a town and called it Jerusalem, and in 1794 the Friends settled there for good. The Friends' relations with native peoples were notably cordial, receiving, housing, and feeding indigenous visitors. And in the autumn of 1794, at the government's invitation, the Friend addressed United States officials and Iroquois chiefs at Canandaigua on the importance of peace and love, a message well received in the run-up to a lasting treaty. But the land disputes curdled into something uglier. In 1799, disaffected followers hungry for title led 3 attempts to arrest the Friend for blasphemy. Historians read the charge for what it was: a fight over property dressed in the language of religion. A constable tried and failed to seize the Friend, a superb rider, on horseback. The women of the house drove off a second attempt. A 30-man posse axed the door at midnight in a third, only for the doctor among them to declare the Friend too ill to move. And when the case finally reached the county court, it ruled that no crime had occurred and invited the Friend to preach to those assembled. The last years brought a painful dropsy from 1816, but the preaching went on, almost to the end. On the 1st of July, 1819, the Society's death book recorded the close in the community's own quiet idiom. For the Friend, they said, had simply left time.
25 minutes past 2 on the clock. The Friend went from here.
There was no funeral, only a regular meeting. The body was laid in a coffin with an oval glass window, sealed in a stone vault in the cellar of the Friend's house, and, years later, quietly moved to an unmarked grave. Celibacy had guaranteed there would be no second generation. Torn by its land suits and starved of new converts, the Society of Universal Friends dwindled over the next 4 decades to extinction. It left no one behind to defend the Friends' memory. And into that silence stepped an enemy. His name was David Hudson, a lawyer and politician tied to the very faction trying to dispossess the society. In 1821, 2 years after the Friend's death, he published a hostile biography that became, by simple default, the standard account. Its subtitle misgendered the Friend with a condescending diminutive. Hudson invented a profligate childhood, sided with the blasphemy prosecutors, and seeded the legends that would cling to the Friend for a century, that the Friend had claimed to be Christ, had tried to walk on water, had tried to raise the dead. Of the miracle stories, the scholarly verdict is blunt. There is no contemporaneous evidence for any of them, and people who knew the Friend said plainly that they were false. Because Hudson's book was the source for nearly every 19th century retelling, the fraud framing hardened into fact, and no sympathetic biography appeared for 143 years. The reasons compound one another. Gender nonconformity that later historians, too, flattened into a woman's pronouns. A literal death and resurrection claim that fit no recognized church. Hudson's outsized, unanswered influence. The total extinction of the society, which left no archive keepers. And a poor fit, finally, with a national story of rational male Protestant founders. The sober eyewitnesses were simply crowded out by the sensation. And yet, the most eloquent thing the Friend ever left behind is a legal document. The Friend had never once held property under the birth name, trusting followers to hold the land instead, rather than see that name on a deed. So when a lawyer, drafting the Friend's will, insisted on naming the testator in full,
the person who, before the year 1777, was known and called by the name of Jemima Wilkinson, but since that time, as the Universal Friend.
The Friend refused to sign that name and made only an X. Some later writers mistook the mark for illiteracy. But the Friend was a voracious reader who quoted whole chapters of scripture from memory. The X was not a confession of incapacity. It was a final act of self-definition, the lifelong refusal, carried into the law of property itself. The estate passed to the faithful Rachel Malin. Rescue, when it came in two stages. In 1964, the historian Herbert Wisby published Pioneer Prophetess, the first rigorous biography, which demanded contemporaneous evidence and so dismantled Hudson's smear, the miracle legends, and the religious pretext for the arrests. Wisby still wrote The Friend as a woman, by the lights of his time. But he saw the meaning of the mark on the will clearly enough.
It led some writers to mistakenly think that the evangelist could not read or write.
Half a century later, in 2015, Paul Moyer went further. He nailed down Hudson's motive in the land suits, placed the Friend at the center of the early republic's debates over religion and gender, and argued that both the old fraud reading and a tidy women's rights reading impose our anachronisms on a figure who understood the self as a genderless divine emissary, and nothing simpler. The objects, meanwhile, survived. In Penn Yan, New York, a county museum keeps the Friend's portrait, Bible, hat, carriage, and saddle, and uses, to this day, the Friend's own pronoun-free speech. The Friend's house still stands on the National Register of Historic Places. The town of Jerusalem endures, and so does a nearby hamlet, simply called Friend. And around the year 2021, a wave of new features in the Smithsonian, on public radio, across the country, reintroduced the Friend to a national audience as one of the earliest non-binary Americans we can name. Look back across the whole arc and the patterns hold. The revolution that dissolved old authority made room for a personal revolution too. The doctrine was unremarkable. The scandal was always the body and the pronoun. The gender refusal was argued from scripture and lived as theology, and it reorganized real lives. The deadliest enemy was never blasphemy, but the most American of motives, title to land. And memory, without an institution to keep it, proved heartbreakingly fragile. The public universal Friend was forgotten not for what was preached, but for who preached it. 2 centuries on, we are only beginning to learn how to say the name and to leave, in the place of a verdict, a single, deliberate mark.